Welcome to Wine Soundtrack International. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Alison Levine, and I'm sitting with Matt Fowles of Fowles Wine from the Strathbogie Ranges in Australia. Welcome, Matt, and tell me, did I say that correctly?
You did. We get some interesting different takes on Strathbogie, but yes, Strathbogie Ranges in Victoria.
So tell us, where is Strathbogie Ranges in Victoria?
So Strathbogie, it's the region Victoria, the state of Victoria is the southernmost part of mainland Australia, down in the southeast corner. And then Strathbogie Ranges are an hour and a half northeast of Melbourne, which is the capital city of that state.
Yeah. And tell me about Fowles Wines.
So Fowles Wine is 100% family owned. My family, we bought the place back in 2005, so relatively new to wine in global terms, if you like. And, I used to be a lawyer by profession. I'm still recovering happily in the wine industry. So we're the real deal, a couple of 100 acres of vineyard, and we do it all ourselves. And my wife even designs the labels. So there you go.
Wow. And I saw your labels. They're beautiful. Tell me, you're 100% estate fruit, not purchasing anything?
We actually make wine on behalf of a lot of other people as well. So we'll occasionally work with some of their fruit as well. But for the most part, we have two vineyards and it comes from there. So, yeah.
And, we're talking Australia, so one would naturally think Shiraz, but tell me what grapes you're working with and what you're making.
Well, people do naturally think Shiraz, funnily enough, but people also think that the region that we come from is either beaches or desert, and our particular region is alpine, and so we're very cool, and because of that, we're inland as well, so we don't have any maritime influence. So because of that, we've got a really great ability to grow a wide variety of varieties, and we grow 12 different varieties. So we have things like Arnaise and Vermentino, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, Merlot, Cabernet, Sangiovese, Mourvedre even, and then, of course, Shiraz as well. Wow. So the full gamut.
Not necessarily what you would expect.
Definitely not what you'd expect. And then, of course, the style in an alpine climate like that, with large diurnal shift, a style that a lot of people are surprised by as well. And that is to say lovely fresh acid and beautifully restrained fruit.
So how many cases of wine do you produce?
So we produce about 100,000 cases of 12 each year. We make 35 different wines, and then we make a whole bunch of wines on behalf of other people as well.
Wow.
Enough to keep us busy.
Yeah. And where are your wines available?
So our biggest market is in Australia, but then we export all over the world. So our focus is the UK in Europe, and then North America, Canada, and the US, and then throughout Asia. So China's a very important market to us, but we've recently opened markets like Vietnam and Sri Lanka and Indonesia, which has been a heap of fun. So, it's pretty exciting. Absolutely, absolutely.
So what's your first memory relevant to wine?
Do you know, it was actually a glass of wine I shared with my father. And funnily enough, the gentleman who makes it, or the family who makes it, they've become great mates. But of course, I didn't know them then. So I was probably about 15, and in our house it was okay to have a little sip of beer or wine growing up. It was a normal part of how we sort of hung out as a family. And the wine was an Elderton Shiraz, a Barossa Shiraz. And I've since become great mates with Alistair, who is a fellow winemaker in the Barossa. So, it was a really special moment. It was one of those things where I took a sip and my mind expanded and I was hooked, so to speak, in a healthy way. Right?
In a healthy way, of course. And as you got a little bit more into wine, what would you say is one of the most memorable wines you ever drank and what that occasion was?
This is always a tough one, right? So this is a good question.
Especially because you probably get to drink a lot of really memorable wines.
Yeah, we do. We're lucky in this industry that we do. I think for me, the occasion is such a big part of it. The wine alone is obviously a beautiful thing, and a lot of care has been taken to make it. But for me, it's more the occasion. So, I can probably list the occasions where I've had great wine that mean the most to me.
So do tell.
Oh, look. That is
and what the wine was. Just one.
Well, the most obvious one would have been, sadly, a Chardonnay from our vineyard. Why I say sadly is because it's not very imaginative. but that was on the occasion of our engagement, my wife and I, so that was pretty special. But no, we've had, look, I had a 19, my mind's going to struggle here. I want to say 1944 Sauterne.
Oof.
Could it have been 1944? Why can I not remember that? Anyway, it was a group of winemakers in our region, and we all sort of, invested in this one bottle. And it was just the most incredible night. The wine was very much alive. The same night we had a 1978, I think it was. I don't have a great memory for the vintage. It's just a feature of my brain. But the older, the 1940s version was the better wine. So that was pretty crazy. You're really drinking history at that point. So there's happily there's been a number of occasions like that. So it's kind of cool.
So you've traveled around a bit, I would guess, based on the markets that you're in.
Yeah.
Traveling around the world, who do you think drinks the best in terms of quality?
That is a really good question. That is a tough question. The market obviously is the market and it's broad, and so there's probably no right answer. I tell you, I think the Australians drink really well. I think, that's not an advertisement for Australia. This is an observation. It's such a big feature of our culture, and I think that's probably lost on a lot of other people looking in. It's a huge feature of our culture. We drink a lot of wine per capita relative to other countries, and I think the industry has had to work hard in recent years, in recent decades, because there's been some tough trading conditions out there. And so the standard of Australian wine is really high. And so I think Australians really enjoy that. We're also, at the moment, we've had decades of growth, so it's a prosperous nation at the moment, and that's obviously helpful when you're buying premium wines or luxury wines. So, so I think the Australians do, and it's a regular part of our culture. I look in China, and we have a great market up there, and I'm such a thrill to educate the Chinese drinkers and wine consumers up there. But, my observation up there is it's not a habitual part of the culture yet. The way we drink it up there is as part of a banquet, which is beautiful. But, my experience talking to them is that they're not drinking at home as a couple, say, over a meal. Mm-hmm. That hasn't gone that far yet, whereas in Australia that would be commonplace. So I think Australia, and then I would say, perhaps it's because I'm in America, but I think the Americans, drink really good wine as well. So, we've had some great occasions here with farm wine.
We have a fair access to wine.
You do, yeah. Well, that's right. You've got the beautiful domestic market, but you're a strong import market as well.
Right, exactly.
And, in Australia, I think only 15% of our consumption is imported, so which is relatively low. And I imagine a lot more here, and certainly it's a lot more in the UK, obviously. But you've got the best wines of the world, always. Everyone wants to be in America, right?
Well, so if we were to come to your home and go into your cellar, aside from the Sauterne that you pulled together to purchase, what would we find in your cellar?
Well, I did a very memorable trip, probably back in, it would have been about 2008, to Bordeaux, and we got kind of lucky. We had some nice introductions to some beautiful people, and we kind of got rolling around there. And I remember buying a 2005 Chateau Pichon Longview, which is a piece of treasure because we went right through their cellar, and I'm looking forward to opening that someday and enjoying it. So that would be one. But look, there's a whole grab bag. We're a pretty eclectic bunch. We're in the wine industry, and we like to collect things from all over. So that's one I'm very much looking forward to opening in the not too distant future.
Well, you'll have to let us know how it tastes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Perfect variety. No, I think wine is a sum of vintage, variety and place. And then obviously the winemaking tradition in that place. So, it's... I think we're not working hard enough if as winemakers we're saying there's something that's perfect, or it's always room for adaptation and evolution. So, but look, Riesling would probably be the variety I'd go closest to saying that. You can. There's so many things to do. It's so graceful in the way it displays place, and that full spectrum flavour, and also its ability to age and the characters that come with that, I think are really, really special. So it would be my desert island wine probably would be Riesling.
Remember that, because I will be asking.
Oh really? Yeah, right. It's definitely a favourite, and a lot of fun to grow.
Yeah. Do you obviously, because there are so many different varieties out there, you're making a lot of wines, you're competing in a pretty competitive market. How do you approach wine critics and scorers? What's your opinion about them?
It's a really good question. We tend to make wine with a very clear idea in mind. So, if you're committed to the idea of the wine, well, then you can't let other people influence that. We make one part of our winemaking is absolutely about place. We're very hands-off. And, my feeling about that is, well, if the critic doesn't like it, they don't like it. I can't help that. It's absolutely an honest representation of our place. Now, happily in reality, a lot of critics do like it, so that's all right. I can live with it. But the other part of the wines we make is about a sense of style, and we're making the wines from vineyard, through maturation and then into bottle and blending in a style that'll work well with food, and particularly we want a fresher acid profile and so on. So, again, that's not for everyone. I can live with that. It's a big, wide market. But again, we have our fair share of success, and I'm happy with that, and I can, it's all good.
Fair enough. So getting down to you as a wine consumer, red, white or rosé?
I reckon 70% of the wine I drink is white. Yeah, I think it's so expressive and interesting, and probably a reflection of our climate too in Australia. It is generally a warmer place. So I tend to, sip in the wine. But then, of course, love my rosé. We make a Sangiovese rosé, and also the reds are a thrill as well.
Ah. Yeah. And still or sparkling?
Still or sparkling? Gee, that's a good question. I went on a big sparkling, I had a sort of an interesting run for a while there, and I'm kind of back in the still camp these days. So I think the stills have it. Still white for me at the moment, yeah.
And so when it comes to food and wine pairing, do you follow rules? Do you think there are rules that we have to follow? Or how do you approach it, whether you're in your home cooking or going out to eat?
So I most certainly don't follow rules, but I think rules are... There are sort of broad principles that exist, and I don't. People are funny about the whole white wine with white meat and red wine with red meat. Clearly, you can not follow that principle, but it's not a bad general statement of food and wine matching. So I think that's broadly applicable. But for us, we get right into the detail of it. And one of the wines we make is a wine called Ladies Who Shoot Their Lunch. And we literally blend that wine to work with wild game. So wild game has a very different texture and intensity. And there's a density to the flesh and an intensity to the aroma. So what we want to do is have a wine that's very silky in the palate, because your palate's already being challenged by wild game. So very silky in the palate, but also with aroma that can stand up to what people might describe game as quite pungent, quite, it's aromatically intense. It's just an intense meat in general, and you want aroma to stand up to it. But if you have a big and extracted and perhaps alcoholic wine, well, then it can be too much for your palate. So, so there's, and so, it's not a rule as such, but we think that's a wine that's the perfect match with game. But you need to be your own judge about that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so maybe I'm making a unfair assumption, but my Aussie friends I know can consume quite a bit of wine, so or other alcohol. Sure. So on those occasions that there's a little too much consumption, do you have any secret remedies for hangovers?
No, I've yet to find one. If anyone tells you, let me know. I think the old adage of just hydrated, be hydrated, that's the key for me. But actually, the one I love most is a swim in the ocean. Oh. So that is the ultimate antidote. We've got the Great Southern Ocean below us in Victoria, and once your head hits that water, you feel as fresh as a daisy, but it is cold. So that's probably the ultimate hangover cure in my book.
Okay. So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure or privilege to taste your wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
Well, that's a funny question, because I like it, but I wouldn't be so bold as to say they're missing out. There's lots. One of the beautiful things about wine is the diversity in wine, but I think it's really, I think the way we're making it is interesting. These ideas we have about blending wines to match certain categories of meat, actually. But also, there's some people who say that Australia's known for big and bold, and that's the extent of it. Well, it's absolutely not the case. Labelling all Australian wine as Australian wine is like labelling all European wine as European wine. Well, there's Spain and there's Germany, and and we're much more like Germany than we are Spain. We're in our particular region, we're a lot cooler. So for those that haven't engaged in Australian wine for a long time, I think it's kind of an exciting spot to start, because it'll challenge perhaps some long-held perceptions about Australian wine that I don't think are valid. And I think our wines are sort of more indicative of the styles we're drinking at home. So. Yeah, give it a go.
See, that answered it without, patting yourself too much on the back.
That's right. We do that in Australia. We're funny like that.
So, if space aliens were to land on your property, which of your wines would you want to present to them?
I think I'd go with Riesling or Shiraz. So, they're the wines that Mother Nature probably gives us the biggest free kick with. The nature of our climate and region is that it grows grapes across the spectrum. So we tend, it's a very kind region to grow grapes. We don't get a lot of disease pressure. We don't get a lot of frost. So we can do, full spectrum winemaking. But really, the feedback we get, the consistent feedback we get is really Riesling and Shiraz are the two. You said one. So I know, I went Riesling last time. I'm going to go Shiraz this time.
Okay. So, your climate is different from what people might stereotypically think of other regions in Australia. It's not a consistently hot climate. You were telling me earlier that it snows and that it's a cool temperature and high elevation. When it comes to vintage, do you see variation? Do you see a lot of variation from vintage to vintage, or do you think that there are more things that kind of repeat themselves from year to year?
Another good question. Look, our climate is continental, so actually we've got a relatively stable climate. We don't have maritime influence. We get large diurnal shift. We're inland, so we do get good consistency, but of course we get vintage to vintage variation, and that's something we celebrate, particularly with our wines of place. The thing about the Strathbogies that I think is quite interesting is that because it's such ancient soil, 440 million years old, all the soil is weathered back to bedrock. We have to be really careful about where we plant the vineyard. And the base soil that we're working with is decomposed granite, and it's remarkably uniform across the vineyards. And in other regions, you'll say, people will say there's a pocket of this soil here or a pocket of this soil there. In our case, it's uniform. So aspect starts to play a much bigger role in the differences in the vineyard. And so the particular hill that we sit on, we have plantings on each side of the hill. So if we have a cool year, the plantings on the warmer side of the hill might produce better fruit, and the reverse is true. So it's a lot to do with aspect in our region more than soil.
So you said that your family has 2 vineyards. Do you spend a lot of time in the vineyards? And when you're spending time in the vineyard, have you been known to talk to your vines?
Talk to the vines. I think, certainly the kids do, that's for sure. But I do spend a lot of time in the vineyard. I think most people accept that that's where wine is, truly made. And during vintage, I think picking decisions are just so important. You get one shot a year to get it right. So during vintage, you'll typically see me walk in the vineyard every morning. And we do have 2 vineyards, so that takes up a fair bit of time. But I think being connected with the fruit is very, very important.
It just isn't a verbal connection.
Not in my case. Not in my case. Maybe once or twice. I'll give you that. But yeah, no, I don't sing. It's probably not a good idea.
So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, when I was little, I wanted to be a vet, and then
makes perfect sense why you became a lawyer.
Right, I know it's very confusing for people to understand. And then I did at 16, I did work experience at a local vet, and I had the best time ever. But I walked away knowing I never wanted to be a vet. And then I got to, in truth, I wanted to study agricultural science. I got talked out of it by a careers counsellor and probably some parents who were, thinking maybe there's a better career out there, or although, they love agriculture, or maybe the correct statement is they thought I should try some different stuff. But so I got distracted by that and ended up circling back to my passion, which is agriculture. You know, vet is about animals and nature and working with nature, and so the idea of being a lawyer, stuck behind a desk wasn't fit for me. But it's not so far a leap of thinking to go from being a vet to out in the field in a vineyard. And we're farmers as well. We grow sheep and pigs and chickens and whatnot. So I get that outlet, the animal husbandry outlet, if you like. But being connected with nature was always my thing. I was the kid outside chasing bugs, not the kid inside playing computer games. So it was a vet originally, and then, I've settled in a very similar space ultimately.
But I'm sure the direction your parents led you in, you have a good foundation with law.
Absolutely. And law is so useful for so many things every day, just structured thinking, and it helps clarity of thought, I think. There's a process for it. And I actually think it's important in winemaking. It's very easy to get caught up in fashion or critics' reviews and get inside your head. But if you're very clear in your thinking, which I think law helps you with, hopefully that provides really good direction, which can shift depending on the circumstances, but a general direction and purpose that, you're working towards, which I actually think it's really useful.
Yeah.
I do, but yeah.
So when you're not working, what do you do in your free time?
Free time, far and few between with 3 little girls on the ground these days. But look, we hang out as a family. That's my number one priority for sure. We're lucky to have a bushy block on the vineyard, so where we graze the sheep, and that's a really cool place to hang out with the kids, and so we do that. And then if we can possibly spare the time and connect 3 or 4 days together, we'll shoot down to a beach somewhere and get the fix that way. Yeah.
And then I know you were telling me that, I don't know if you say this is in your free time, it's probably part of your lifestyle, but that you're an ethical hunter?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so very proud and passionate hunter, and but ethical hunter. And in Australia, we have a very delicate ecosystem. It's a feature of being an island and an ancient land. A lot of unique flora and fauna. And regrettably, in history, we've had animals introduced to our country. And, the standard way to manage that, as perceived by government, is to poison the animals and manage them that way. I understand why people think that's the right way, but for me, it feels like an environmental crime. Mother Nature's put this protein on the earth. We should, use it. But apparently shooting's an ineffective control measure. So anyway, we work very hard to be sympathetic in nature in the vineyard and in life generally. We grow our own vegetables, we grow our own sheep, which we slaughter, our pigs, which we slaughter. And then the sort of ultimate free range, if you like, is wild meat. And I've become fascinated by it because it is minimum intervention meat eating. It's the they live in the wild. They don't know that they've been shot. They don't know that their life has ended, because with ethical hunting, it's very important to be a good marksman. So and then we honour the animal by eating it and all of it. So offal is a favourite around our house. I shot a deer recently, broke it down overnight. And then in the morning I get up and I cook the liver typically. And my little girls, 9, 3 and 2, they don't know what liver is. And I'm just eating it in the kitchen. And my little 2-year-old at the time there sidled up next to me and wanted a bite. So I gave it to her and she just happily ate that liver. And I just thought, isn't that an interesting lesson? Unaffected by patterns or, mainstream processes, she was quite happy to engage with beautiful wild shot meat. And for a lot of people, I understand that's challenging, but she's unaffected by it and she loved it. She just got into it. And so, yeah, we are very careful to honour the animal. Mm-hmm. When you go through the effort of harvesting from the wild, well, then you don't want to waste anything because it's just such an involved process. So, I'm really proud of the way we live. I know it's not always popular to talk about it, but to face the reality of meat has taught me a lot about consumption, and consumption across the board, whether you're chewing up plastics or fossil fuels or whatever it is. Just being respectful of resource is a really important feature of our living now. So, I got a bit serious then.
No, I think that's beautiful. I mean, I think that there's a responsibility that we who choose to consume meats should have. And unfortunately, when we live in cities, we don't have that same sort of responsibility. And to be aware of it is the first step.
Yeah.
I think.
And there are consumption choices that you can make even in cities. And, it's not a judgy position of mine.
Sure.
I understand that people don't have that opportunity necessarily, but there are choices we can make right through the chain that impact favourably, animal welfare and so on. So, people find it, they say it's incongruous, but I actually think the way we treat animals is the highest order. It's the
You made a wine specifically to pair with it. I think you've honoured them.
I hope so. I hope we're getting there.
So, do you do any sports?
Yes, I do enjoy a run and a bike ride. Because we're in an alpine region, we hit snowboard and skis, so that's kind of fun. Obviously, with kids, that brings a whole new wave of interest. And then diving. Diving for food is a big one. And then I suppose hunting's recreational sport. Yeah, that might count. Yeah. So we get busy doing that. But sadly, not enough there at the moment. Yeah.
And follow any sports teams?
I do follow the Melbourne Demons. And if anyone's listening, please don't Google them. They're having a hard trot. We last won a premiership in 1964, and as my cousins regularly remind me, because they barrack for different teams, we're not doing so well. So
the Melbourne
Demons.
The Melbourne Demons.
AFL, Aussie rules football.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if the Melbourne Demons were to win, actually, which of your wines would you want to toast with them?
Well, that's easy. That would be the Exception Sparkling, which is a Magnum we produced, 2011. We had it on lees for 5 years, which was kind of cool. And the dosage was a Hennessy Cognac, which was kind of cool. So, wow. And it's got this beautiful, it's 100% Pinot Noir. But yeah, just beautiful colour, beautiful wine, full of life 8 years later. And that would be the wine that I would choose to celebrate with.
That should be incentive for them to play better.
Yeah, exactly right. I'll tell you what, every player can have one of them if they win the flag. Come on now.
Go Melbourne Demons.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're planning a romantic evening, which I'm sure there are few and far between, well, not too many few, you have 3 kids, but but with young kids, what sort of wines make for a romantic evening in your home?
Oh, man, these questions are tough. I like this. This is funny. I don't know, something with character and interest, something that'll evolve over the course of the meal. I'm a major sucker for aged Riesling. For me, it's one of the greatest wines in the world, wine classes, if you like, in the world. So something like that's, taken a bit of time to evolve. Wine's really not made until it's had time to evolve in bottle in many cases. And so something like that's a bit special. We've been hanging on to for a while, something we can enjoy over time, over the whole meal, which is kind of cool.
Huh. So when you think back to, obviously your parents gave you some advice on what you should study, and maybe that was the best advice or maybe it wasn't. But when you look back at all the advice you've received, what would you say is some of the best advice and who gave it to you?
Actually, I think the advice to study law was good advice, actually. Although, it was a reminder that you do circle back to your passion. But the best advice, that is so tough. I've had this view that advice, well, there are people who are wise and can advise you, but, invariably people don't have the full grasp of the circumstances. So I've got this kind of view that good advice intersects with, it's sometimes a fluke when good advice comes. It could be the right advice for that moment, but that's not necessarily known by the person advising, if you know what I mean. So I've had moments where I'm like, that is the greatest advice. And the same person might give me advice later and I think, oh my God, we're in different planets. But so I think the best advice probably comes from within. And, the beauty of that is you get to live with your mistake or otherwise. So, I don't know, we try and take a very deliberate path and we're happy with that. And, of course, you take advice from people, but I always treat it with a healthy measure of reflection internally make sure that the advice is appropriate in the circumstances. So, wow, this is getting deep, eh? What?
So when you look back at your career, and it can extend beyond the wine industry, but what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date so far in your work?
Proudest achievements to date. I feel like I've got so much work to do, to be a bold person to sort of call it now. But I think...
I'm not saying this is the pinnacle and you will achieve nothing after. I'm saying so far.
Yeah, so far. Well, clearly the greatest work is putting a family on the ground. But in work terms, look, unlocking the potential of our vineyards. I think, we've worked really hard to make sure that our wines express region and that we're telling that story faithfully. So, we've been lucky enough to win awards and do all that sort of thing, and it's so easy to point to those. But for me, it's about, I think sustainable farming or sustainable life, bordering on subsistence life. That's something I'm very proud of, and it's reflected in our wines and how we make our wines. So, that for me gives me a lot of satisfaction in what we do, and I'm very proud of that. So does that count?
Yeah, that absolutely counts. So I want you to complete a sentence for me.
Oh, goodness.
A table without wine is like?
A table without wine is like... I was going to say something silly. No, a table without
silly.
A table without wine...
You're allowed to
like
be silly.
Christmas without Southern rock lobster, which is what we die for. So I don't know. It doesn't seem right, a table without wine to me. So yeah.
And what was your silly answer?
It's like my little girl's without a pretty dress. That's a silly answer, isn't it? But anyway, no, that it just doesn't seem right. It's so cute.
So, imagine a scenario where we're at a restaurant and there's a person sitting at a table with a bottle of your wine, and the paparazzi are in the window taking pictures because this is someone very important, very famous from any walk of life. Who would you want that person to be drinking your wine?
Ooh, that's a great question. There's a guy called Andrew Jefford in England who's a wine nut, and he's got a giant wine brain. I'd be really happy if he was enjoying our wine, because I think he really gets it. But that's not really, he's maybe not a famous dude. I don't know that paparazzi would be. No. But that'd be kind of cool.
I mean, if that's who you want drinking your wine, that's the answer to the question.
Well, that is the answer then. No, that'd be kind of cool. That's the first that springs to mind. I see him as just such a giant intellect. And if he was, appreciating our wine for what it was, that'd be kind of cool. It'd be humbling. It'd be good.
Maybe he'll listen to this and drink your
wine.
On,
Andrew. Come on, man.
So, where do you think we'll be? I mean, you were talking about your unique climate. I mean, Australia has a pretty consistent climate overall, but we're going through climate changes and, we don't know what the future holds. You think we'll be drinking wine in 500 years? Or?
Most certainly will adapt somehow. Maybe not from our region. I literally don't know. But we're already adapting in Australia. We're very much on the front foot. In our own vineyard, we planted Vermentino, a heat-tolerant white, to see if we could, as a hedge to climate change. Turns out our climate's very cool, and we're now using it in sparkling production, which is awesome, because the sparkling Vermentino has been super popular.
Well, but you don't waste anything at your property.
We do not. We find a use. We adapt and we carry on. But, look, it's a massive issue facing industry. But, the wine industry is very innovative and adaptable, and we'll figure it out. But humans will be drinking wine 500 years from now. I'm sure of it.
Okay. Earlier, you said that if you went to a deserted island, you'd take Riesling. So now's your chance. What are the 3 wines you would take?
The three specific Rieslings?
No. Three. You get to take 3 wines to a deserted island. Any 3 wines. You want to take 3 Rieslings? Go for it. But
well, you know what? I mean, why I say Riesling to a desert island is, assuming a choice of one, would be, crisp and dry expression, delicious, perfect for that hot evening. Aperitif with a salad, fine, good. And then mature Riesling, it goes into a different space. That would, and you can have it with more complex food, and it behaves the same way as in similar ways to a classic Australian dry Riesling.
Yeah.
And then you got the little sweetie at the end. You can have a late harvest or a Proudest Riesling, and that's got dessert taken care of. So I figure Riesling's like my wine, and I'll take any expression that we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Your three choices are Riesling.
You know what? If I'm played by the rules, I would take Riesling. I would take. Well, the easy answer would be rosé, and then a rosé, and in my case, a Sangiovese rosé, and then I'd take a Shiraz, a cool climate Shiraz. That's what I'd take.
Okay.
I feel like that covers the field.
Okay. Well, now I'm going to put you to the test.
Oh,
we play a little game. It's called Wine Soundtrack, after all, so music had to come into play.
Right.
Didn't ask you earlier if you're into music, but we're going to test. So music usually conjures up a feeling or a sensation, as wine does, and sometimes we listen to music or we're inspired, to listen to something. So based on the wines, your desert island, and you've got a test here. What you would pair, what you'd want to listen to while you're drinking wines, the wines in your island. So let's start with your rosé of Sangiovese.
Ooh, this is tough. Maybe some fast bluegrass. I'm on a bit of a bluegrass binge at the moment. It's sort of making a mini revival, and it's such fun, the fast banjo. I don't know.
I like that.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. It's a fun, rosé is a fun style, a versatile style, and I think bluegrass would be that's my call. That's what I'm going to do.
Own your first answer.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay, cool climate Shiraz.
Cool climate Shiraz. I'm going to go with jazz. I used to play jazz trumpet and for years and years and years, and I feel like the right silky, cool climate Shiraz, just chilling out, probably a fire with a bit of jazz in the background. I reckon that'll work pretty well.
Now, you put this out there, 3 styles of Riesling. So let's start with your kind of zippy, fresh style of Riesling.
Well, I've got a very diverse musical background, including a mother that was a violin teacher and an opera singer. So I'm going to go with opera.
Okay.
Did you say dry Riesling first? Yeah, dry Riesling. I'm going to go with opera.
Okay.
It's kind of exhilarating and wakes you up, I'm going to run with that.
Now we get into your aged Riesling that's got a little more body, a little more character.
Oh, man, this is really tough. Well, my brother is a tenor. And he's more, not so much opera side, but choral stuff. And why don't I go with a tenor? Actually, he was part of 10 tenors, so we'll go with 10 tenors singing some music. That wasn't very eloquent. I'm trying to work with me. Come on, that'll do.
And then we'll jump on to the last one.
Right.
Your little sweetie, that
All
Riesling
right.
with that...
I'm going to go with the Frozen soundtrack for my girls. It is, it's so sweet, but man, if you drink too much, it's just too much. It's too much.
Say, let it go, let it go.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going with the Frozen soundtrack. You can have a little bit, but it's so sweet, you got to let it go. I like it.
That's fantastic. Okay, I got one more question for you.
All right.
In all the places in the world, what's at the top of your bucket list of wine regions you want to go visit?
Piedmont. Yeah, and Nebbiolo. I'm really interested in these lighter style reds with fresher acid. I think the way people are drinking wine is evolving. I believe it's evolving to these lighter styles. And what a benchmark example of a lighter style red in the world, or a fresher acid driven red in the world. Yeah, I'm going to go there next year. That's my plan.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So you're going to go there next year, and we should all get on our bucket list to come visit you. So can we visit you? Do you have a tasting room? Tell us how we can find your wines.
Yeah, most definitely. So it's Fowles Wine, Northeast Victoria. We do have a restaurant and cellar door. We have a tasting room where we invite people to taste actually offal nose to tail. So you can have little tastes of chicken hearts or beef tongue, and the restaurant's a bit more conventional, modern Australian, but food and wine together. We also have our mature or museum released wines on offer and tasting all the time. So, come on up. We're there, fowleswine.com. Check it out and come and see us.
Fantastic. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really interesting, and I want to come eat in your restaurant, and I will even, not the biggest offal lover, will try your nose to tail.
It's a deal. You're on. Bring it on. Thanks very much.
You.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack International. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.